In the dying days of the Third Reich, as the world rejoiced over the fall of Hitler's empire, one man was quietly plotting his escape. His name was Fritz Suhren, the commandant of Ravensbrück, a concentration camp built for women and remembered as one of the darkest places on earth. But Suhren wasn't just running for his life. He believed he had a bargaining chip, something powerful enough to save him from the hangman's noose. In his custody was a British spy, a woman whose life he thought he could trade for his own freedom. This is the story of how the Butcher of Ravensbrück tried to cheat justice, and how that gamble led to a death more painful than he ever imagined. When the war finally ended, the guns went silent, but a new battle began. Across Europe, the hunt for justice took shape. For every major war criminal tried at Nuremberg, there were thousands of others, guards, officers, and commandants, who believed they could simply disappear into the crowd and start over. Fritz Suhren was one of them. He had ruled Ravensbrück with cruelty and fear, responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands. Yet, even in defeat, he believed he could outsmart justice, that he could erase years of horror by handing over one captive soul. But history had other plans. This is the story of Fritz Suhren, his crimes, his desperate flight from accountability, and the relentless manhunt that ensured his evil would never be forgotten. To understand Fritz Suhren, you first have to understand the place that defined his evil: Ravensbrück. Just 56 miles north of Berlin, it was the only major concentration camp the Nazis built exclusively for women. It opened in May 1939, and its first prisoners were political opponents, Jehovah's Witnesses, and women the regime called asocial. But as the war spread, Ravensbrück grew. Soon, women from over 30 nations were crammed behind its walls: Polish resistance fighters, Soviet prisoners of war, and thousands of Jewish, Sinti, and Roma women. It was a universe of suffering, and from August 1942 until liberation, Fritz Suhren was its absolute ruler. Born in 1908, Fritz Suhren was an early and eager Nazi, joining the party and its SA paramilitary wing in 1928. By 1941, he'd transferred to the SS and was stationed at the Sachsenhausen concentration camp. It was there Suhren perfected the specific brand of cruelty that would define his career. At Sachsenhausen, Suhren served as a deputy commandant and quickly built a reputation for sadism. In a now infamous incident, he ordered a German political prisoner to hang a fellow inmate. The prisoner refused. It was an act of defiance that should have gotten him killed. Instead, Suhren came up with a more twisted punishment. He forced the man to stand on the gallows right next to the victim, as a terrified young inmate was made to operate a winch designed to prolong the hanging. Suhren made him watch every second of the slow, agonizing death, a clear message about his absolute power. He was also put in charge of one of Sachsenhausen's most horrific operations: the mass execution of Soviet prisoners of war. Starting in August 1941, thousands of captured Red Army soldiers were brought to the camp to be murdered. Within weeks, between 11,000 and 18,000 POWs were shot in the back of the neck in a purpose-built facility, an industrial-scale killing that Suhren directly oversaw. This was the man who, in August of 1942, was promoted. He became commandant of Ravensbrück, the Reich's central women's camp. He arrived with a chillingly simple philosophy of extermination: work the prisoners as hard as possible while feeding them as little as possible. Under his command, the camp descended into a new level of hell. Originally built for a few thousand, its population exploded to over 50,000 by early 1945, with women crammed into barracks and tents, living in squalor and constant fear. In total, over the camp's history, about 140,000 prisoners passed through the Ravensbrück system. An estimated 28,000 of them died. They died from starvation, disease, exhaustion, and the casual brutality of the guards. The camp was guarded by female SS Aufseherinnen. Ravensbrück was the main training ground for these guards, and while over 4,000 were trained there throughout the war, the 150 or so on duty at any time were notorious for a cruelty that often matched or even exceeded that of their male counterparts. Survivor Elsier Maréchal, a Belgian resistance member, later testified, "We were to die of misery, hunger, and exhaustion. The first thing I saw when I arrived was a cart with all the dead bodies piled on it. We did not feel like we had the value of cattle. You worked or you died." Suhren presided over this empire of death with cold efficiency. When the SS implemented the 14F13 program to murder prisoners deemed unfit for work, Ravensbrück became a key site, sending nearly 2,000 women to be gassed at killing centers. The camp also became a laboratory for grotesque medical experiments. Suhren was ordered to provide inmates to the SS doctor Karl Gebhardt for his research. He initially showed a flicker of resistance, not out of any moral objection, but because he feared it would cause unrest. The SS High Command swiftly overruled him, forcing him to personally apologize to the doctor and give him all the women he wanted. Survivors watched in horror as young Polish women were infected with gangrene or had their bones broken to simulate battlefield wounds, all without anesthetic. As the war turned against Germany, the killing at Ravensbrück sped up. In early 1945, with the Red Army closing in, the SS installed a gas chamber in a hut near the crematorium. In the final months of the war, between 5,000 and 6,000 prisoners were gassed to death. Every death, whether from a guard's bullet, a doctor's needle, or the slow grind of starvation, was Suhren's responsibility. He wasn't just a cog in the machine, he was one of its chief operators. And for him, the end of the war wasn't the end of his story. It was just the start of his next chapter, survival. As April 1945 drew to a close, the Third Reich was collapsing. The rumble of Soviet artillery could be heard from Berlin, and Fritz Suhren knew he couldn't expect mercy from the Red Army, now just miles from Ravensbrück. Fearing capture, he crafted a desperate escape plan. At the heart of it was a very special prisoner. Her name was Odette Sansom. A French-born mother of 3 living in England, she'd been recruited into Britain's Special Operations Executive, or SOE. Codenamed Lise, she was sent into occupied France to work with the resistance, but in April 1943, she and her commanding officer were betrayed and arrested. During her interrogation, Odette endured unimaginable torture. Her back was burned with a red-hot poker, and all of her toenails were pulled out. Yet, she revealed nothing. Instead, she stuck to a calculated bluff, that she was married to her commanding officer, Peter Churchill, and that he was the nephew of the British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. When the Gestapo condemned her to death on 2 counts, she famously shot back, "Then you will have to make up your mind on what count I am to be executed, because I can only die once." The ruse worked. Instead of an execution, she was sent to Ravensbrück. The lie about her connection to Churchill had spread, and Commandant Suhren knew he had a celebrity prisoner. For her first year, this offered little protection. She was thrown into a punishment cell on a starvation diet, and at one point was kept in total darkness for months. She was on the verge of death, but as an Allied victory became certain, Suhren's calculus changed. This woman, who he'd allowed to waste away, was suddenly his most valuable asset. In the final days of April 1945, just before Soviet forces liberated the camp, Suhren made his move. He grabbed Odette Sansom, telling her he was taking her to the American lines. His logic was delusional. By delivering Winston Churchill's niece to safety, he believed the Allies would treat him with leniency. He thought he could trade one life for amnesty for his monumental crimes. He put the gaunt and frail Odette into his car, and they drove through the chaos of a collapsing Germany. On May 3rd, 1945, they reached an American military position. Suhren, the feared commandant, approached the soldiers to surrender himself and his hostage. It didn't go as he planned. Odette, seizing her moment, spoke in a near whisper. "This is Fritz Suhren, the commandant of Ravensbrück concentration camp," she told the astonished soldiers. "Please make him your prisoner." Turning to the man who had been her captor, she demanded his pistol. Suhren, his gamble utterly failed, meekly handed over his weapon. The Butcher of Ravensbrück was under arrest. As the soldiers took him away, Odette, with incredible foresight, went back to his car and retrieved his personal belongings, including photo albums that would later be used as evidence. Suhren was taken into British custody and was set to be a defendant in the first Hamburg-Ravensbrück trial. But in November 1946, just before the trial began, he and another Ravensbrück official, Hans Pflaum, escaped from their internment camp, while 16 of their former colleagues were tried in Hamburg. With 11 sentenced to death, Suhren and Pflaum were fugitives. They fled south, hiding in Bavaria under false names. Suhren took the alias Herbert Pakusch. For over 2 years, the man responsible for so much death was free. But the hunt was on. Then, in March 1949, a break came. Acting on a tip, US soldiers located and arrested Suhren and Pflaum. Their life on the run was over. When he was caught, Suhren was carrying valuables he'd stolen from his victims: rings, watches, and even gold teeth. This time, there would be no escape. The recapture of Suhren and Pflaum in 1949 raised a question. They'd escaped from the British and been caught by the Americans, but their crimes had been committed on German soil against victims from all over Europe, including thousands from France. The decision was made to extradite them to the French occupation zone. They would be tried by a French military court in the city of Rastatt. The trial began in February 1950. The jury was made up of French officials, and some sources suggest it also included representatives from the Netherlands and Luxembourg, nations that had also lost countless women to Ravensbrück. The prosecution built its case brick by brick, calling on dozens of former prisoners to testify. These women, survivors of hell, now stood in a court of law to confront the man who was its architect. Suhren's defense was a masterclass in arrogance. He denied everything, facing a mountain of evidence and the harrowing testimony of survivor after survivor. He dismissed their statements as invalid and even tried to intimidate them on the stand. But the evidence was overwhelming. The sheer scale of the death toll, the systematic starvation, the medical experiments, and the gas chambers were all laid bare. His co-defendant, Hans Pflaum, the former head of labor deployment, was equally culpable for working the prisoners to death. The trial and appeals stretched into May, but the outcome was never in doubt. On March 10, 1950, the court delivered its verdict. Fritz Suhren and Hans Pflaum were found guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The sentence was death. For 3 more months, the two men sat in a cell. Then, on the morning of June 12, 1950, 2 days after his 42nd birthday, Fritz Suhren was taken from his cell. He and Pflaum were transported to a forest clearing near Sandweier. A French firing squad was waiting. While many Nazi war criminals were hanged, the French court had ordered them to be shot. It was a soldier's death, but for a man who had presided over the murder of tens of thousands of defenseless women, it was a death far cleaner than any his victims had received. The commands were given, the rifles cracked, and the man who had been the all-powerful commandant of Ravensbrück fell dead. The story of Fritz Suhren is a stark reminder that systematic evil is built on individual choices. Suhren wasn't a distant bureaucrat. He was an active, willing participant in mass murder. His policy of extermination through starvation and overwork was a conscious decision. His compliance with horrific medical experiments, after a brief and self-serving objection, revealed a man whose only moral compass pointed toward his own career. His final, desperate gamble, using Odette Sansom as a human shield, showed the profound cowardice at the heart of his cruelty. He truly believed that a single, important life could somehow outweigh the deaths of the approximately 28,000 people who perished under his command. It was the ultimate expression of a worldview that saw human beings not as people, but as assets to be used, discarded, or traded. The justice he faced was slow and imperfect. His escape was a galling failure of the post-war system, but his recapture and trial were a testament to the unwavering resolve of the Allies and the courage of the survivors. The testimony of women like Odette Sansom, who endured so much and refused to be broken, was the weapon that finally brought him down. The execution of Fritz Suhren doesn't bring back a single life, but it closes the circle. It affirms a fundamental principle: there can be no escape from history and no evading responsibility for crimes against humanity. It was the final, necessary act in a long, difficult quest for justice.